a moment. And Ronnie, I'll ask you to serve as our button-up man there.
That's all we need.
Okay. Good morning to everybody. A little bit of notes here before we begin. Dave Wood had his surgery on Friday, and I think originally Jan thought they might keep him till Monday or Tuesday, but it sounds like he might be coming home today. So please keep them in your prayers. He did pretty well. And we want to continue to remember Chase and Caroline. Chase is a nephew to Margie Popovich. And Shannon and Trudy called yesterday, and they were, I think, working their way through West Virginia. And she wanted to know they had sunshine. And I'm going to pass around some sign-ups. There's two of these. One of them is on the second one's on the pastries that begin and go through the winter. Sunday morning donuts, we sometimes call them, but it doesn't have to be donuts. Sometimes people want to bring something a little bit more, a little less unhealthy than donuts. But the other one is for tonight's singing. Thanks singing at Elwood now is Gene Stone's place. And I know that some of you have plans to go, but you're not wanting to come all the way back here to go all the way back there. So let's see, how can we just make sure when you sign up that you are going, that you let me know that you're not going to be meeting us here at the building, that you'll want to go straight there. And when you get there, remember that we're in the assisted living part of Antonine Village. And there's actually been a little change in plans as of this morning, but I'm kind of happy with the way the changes have taken place. Our venue has just changed a tiny bit, but we're actually going to be right across the middle with Alice Jean's place. A little bit more intimate, but there'll be room for us, some to sit, some to stand, and it should be a nice evening. And also on this, it's real important that I find out if you're going to go to Cracker Barrel with us, because I have to call Cracker Barrel to Patrick. I'm not meaning to stub you there. So let's see, how can we do it on the Cracker Barrel? Just let me know if you're not going to be going to Cracker Barrel, because I need to call them and give them a ballpark figure as to who is going and who isn't. And when that gets all passed around, we'll maybe be midway through class, and then we might need to give a little update on that.
Terry, maybe it's here. What time are you expecting to be back?
Well, I think we'll get there at 4:30 and sing for a half hour, and then we're going to go to supper at Cracker Barrel. So, yeah. Be there at 4:30, and we'll just be singing, maybe not even for a full half hour. And since we'll be right at Stone, we'll have our visit in and stuff, and we'll be on the Cracker Barrel. So, and we'd love you to go to Cracker Barrel, but if you can't go, and also, I don't know that we'll need this, but if any of you, like Chopix are picking up Charlene, and they're going to go on their own, but if you want to go, but you are worried about driving, of course it'll be light when we go there, but by the time we get down there, it'll be darker. So if you have an issue with, you want to go, but you don't have the ride because you don't feel good about driving in the dark, but let us know, and we'll try to arrange to get you a lift somehow. Okay, any other announcements before we begin here? Let's bow in prayer. Thank you, Lord, for the night's rest. Thank you for a new week and a new day to begin our week. Father, we're mindful this morning of people, even in our nation, that are facing serious calamities with fires and still recovering from storms. And help us, Father, here in our area to catch ourselves and not grumble about the weather we might be having and maybe not enjoy. Thank you for your love for us. Bless us as we study together. Through Christ we pray. Amen. We have a bunch of trees in our house, so that was a confession in that prayer. I always tell people I have trees that are some of the first ones to let go of their leaves, and then I've got some that hang on to the very end. And we still have a lot of leaves on our trees that have to come down. And usually I make it a goal where they're all up by Thanksgiving, and I don't see, and it's not just me. I mean, on the way here, we were looking around. There's still a lot of trees with leaves on them. So our area will probably be getting up leaves in around Christmas time. Unless you ascribe to Fred Chester's view, and that is God put them there and he can put them away. Sometimes that seems awful appetizing to me. Let's begin our study this morning.
Hey, Terry?
Yes, Keith.
Then I had a good report yesterday.
Say that again.
She had a good report.
Oh, good. Yeah, y'all went on. Yes. Very good. Glad to hear that. I would like to ask if any of you have any subtopics. We're about to bring this study to a close, surely by the year's end, which would only mean a few more Sundays. Actually, Jeannie and I and Mark are going to be going down to Georgia in late the end of the month, so we won't be here the last Sunday of the month. But anyway, a few more Sundays left where I'd like to continue the study for just a little bit longer, and then we'll start a new one at the beginning of the year. And I know some of you have really enjoyed the study on home builders, but if you have any subtopics that you want to be addressed, I don't know that I'm capable of it, but I'll surely consider it. And so we've covered, this is lesson 17. We've covered a lot of different aspects of family life. But if there's something in particular that you want to deal with, please scribble it down, a note down, and give it to me, and maybe we'll consider it as one of the final lessons. Let's start out this morning on a little bit of a semi-humorous, although I don't know that Linda Bernstein was necessarily, I think she wrote it to be. Let's go down to the middle of the page, the little highlighted section. 8 things not to say to your aging parents. So last week we talked about what kind of responsibilities do grandparents have to help with young children and their own children, to be a support mechanism. And we did discuss maybe that there is a trend, and I don't want to be pointing fingers in this way. That's not my intention at all. But there is a trend for more and more golden agers to strike forward with the idea of independence. And you may not like the expression, whatever term you want to use for it, but also indulgence. And maybe this is captured in a bumper sticker that we see that we laugh at, and it's a joke, but maybe it's not a joke. I'm spending my grandchildren's inheritance. Well, first of all, I don't know that you have to leave your grandkids a bundle of money behind. I'm not arguing that way. But there is a changing disposition among some of our older folks that I've done my time, and I'm going to go play for the last years of my life. So don't bother me with the grandkids, and I'm going to do whatever I want to do. Now, maybe that's your attitude, and some would even say you've earned it, and maybe you've earned it in ways that, stronger ways than I even can imagine. I become more and more aware, as time goes on, how many of our families are really strapped in different ways. And sometimes a sense of normalcy within a family, I don't mean this to be insulting, but it's almost not there anymore. Or we have to step back and say, what is normal? It just seems like people are on the go all the time doing something. And sometimes it is very much, Vic and Deb are not feeling well this morning. Deb's been sick, and Vic was in our meeting yesterday, but he sounded like a frog, and they may be here later, I don't know. But if you listen to Vic and Deb for just a little bit, their woes in regards to family will just wear you out. It just seems like one issue after another. And that is not just a Vic and Deb problem, it seems to be everywhere almost. All right, so I don't want to harp on that too much, but let's start out on a little bit of a light note where we can all kind of relate to that, and I would be glad to have any feedback along the line here. 8 things not to say to your parents. Number 1, how can you not remember that? All right, we're talking about older parents, and you're now, let's skip up to the top here and read this. Bob Diffenbaugh said there are 2 great tasks in life to which most of us are called. The first is bearing and raising children, and the second one is caring for our parents in their declining years. So that's 2 biggies that we really can't avoid in life. Very important responsibilities. So here we are trying to take care of our older parents and grandparents. And so each of these, Bernstein recommends what not to say, and then she gives us a little preview of maybe a better way to say it. So I'm trying to just abbreviate some of her thoughts. So the first thing is not to say to them, how can you not remember that? Now, Jeannie, I want to direct that at you, because I am older, although...
I didn't say it to my parents.
Okay, but you could say it to your older husband and get away with it. You don't feel any conscience about that at all? Oh, I see, because you're a little bit older, you can get away with it.
Okay, I'll just say it. I'm sorry.
All right, so rather than saying, how can you not remember that, you say something easy. Look, see this sticker? You're going to write a little note, and you're going to help remind. I think that Linda's over there smiling, and I think she's good at that. She's probably already doing this.
You write your notes, but then you forget where you put your notes. That doesn't help you.
Well, the sticker wasn't meant for you, it was meant for them. But you're saying you wrote it and put down the sticker.
How many times have we all done that?
Yeah, right. Number 2, you could do that if you really tried. Somehow I hear Nick saying that. Remember that, Ron, when you get older. You might have to refer to this. It would be better to say, let me watch and see where you're having trouble. And I can hear Nick saying this too. Let me watch and see where you're having trouble so we can figure out how to get this done. Okay? Somebody's trying to get you to do something that's beneficial for you. And I'm not necessarily talking in a physical therapy kind of a setting, but whatever it might be, and you can jump on them and berate them, but you can go at a different way. This number 3 is really strikes home with me. I just showed you how to use the DVR yesterday. Have any of you who are older had a smarter, like younger one talk to you about electronics in any way? They think they're so smart. I really got a chuckle out of Jeannie taking down Sydney Jean a while back, one time when she was
About 10 years.
she was trying to figure out how to use a phone, and, you know, what's the word to describe Sydney's attitude, maybe, like condescending, maybe. And then Jeannie had just about had it with that little attitude, and then she said, you know, sometime if you want to ask me, I'll tell you how to sew, or I'll tell you how to cook.
Or turn the coffee maker.
Or turn the coffee maker on. So sometimes, yeah, we have these little electronic nerds running all around us, and they know how to do all that. They don't know how to do some other things. But so we've got to be careful. It would be better to say, look, Grandpa, you wouldn't have to tell Dan this because he's an electronic whiz, but you might say, Grandpa, I'll show you that again. Okay, let's go through it again. I'll even write you a little cheat sheet, you know, on how to. Number 4, what does that have to do with what we're talking about? It would be better would just be to redirect and say, Grandma, we were talking about how much you like my garden lettuce. Because I don't mean this in any way disrespectful, because I love Morris and Elizabeth Miller. Some of you remember them from Mark Monroe days. And Morris Miller was one of the guys that he could spin a yarn. He could start telling you something, and you could kind of look at your watch and you could think this story is going to take about an hour. And you may be sitting in his living room and he had this if you dared to ask him, Morris, what did you do in the Army? Well, and then it would start, and he would tell you stories, and he would tell you about one time when they were going from France to Germany, and but then they had to turn around because they were about to run out of gas, and then, you know, the story just goes on and on and on, and sometimes you reach the point where you just say, get to the point! What are you trying to tell me? I wouldn't do that, but I would sometimes then in our family, I would use that. And when Jeannie would start telling me something and she would start going off on a tangent, I would say, Morris, get to the point. What are you wanting to say? You know, say it. So sometimes we get exasperated with older folks because we lose their attention and they go off on a sidetrack. All right, number 5 is a big one. You already told me that. It would be better to even here, Bernstein recommends a little humor goes a long way. It would be better, somebody's telling you a story. Jeannie's dad was really bad about this. He would tell, short-term memory. Patrick, are you shaking your head saying your dad's? No. Okay. He would tell you a story, and then he would tell you the story again as if he never told you, and that would go on multiple times. And Bernstein says, when they start doing that, you just look at them and say, and let me guess what else was going to happen. And then you kind of finish the story for them. And you're not meaning that to be disrespectful. It's just a gentle way of saying, yeah, Bob, you told me that before. I know that story by heart. So there's nice ways. I guess a good template to have in mind here is down at the bottom of our notes, one question. The golden rule really is good for dealing with the golden years. Do unto them as you would like it to be done to you when you get there. So you treat the golden years in your family, grandpa, grandma, might be mom and dad, treat them gently, and you treat them the way you would like to be treated when you get to that stage. Number 6, I want your silver tea service when you die. That kind of sounds like the prodigal son, doesn't it? Yeah. That might get you a slap down and maybe a verbal tongue lashing, but it's better to say, Mom, I've been reading and talking to some people, and it's really useful if parents kind of anticipate and kind of make a list of, like, if you've got some really special things that you want to know to certain people, that you kind of let that be made known later? Because I've known a lot of families that get in fights about that after their loved ones are gone. So there's better ways to introduce that, okay? You don't have to be quite so blunt there. Or this one is common, wake up! Or maybe the opposite of that is, be quiet. Shh. I'm getting a little hard of hearing, you all know that. And sometimes when I'm watching TV and somebody else will walk into the room, I'll say, shh. And that really turns them off for some reason. I mean, they just want to make all the more noise. Something about that does not work. You're trying to hear what a panel's saying on a news show, and they walk in and start gabbing, and you say, shh. And they seldom ever do they say. It's almost like it antagonizes them. Mom, I'm looking at Sherry. Mom, I think you'd really like to hear about this. Sherry's sleeping in her easy chair. We're fast forward many, many years, Sherry. And she's sleeping in her easy chair, and you can say, Mom, wake up! This is what you know, or you can be gentle, hey, Mom, this is the part we wanted to hear. Okay. And then finally, number 8, hello, your grandson's name is Brian. The grandpa can't remember the name of his grandson, and you can get on him hard about that. Or you can be diplomatic and kind and say, "It's Ryan, Dad. This is your 4th grandson. This is Ryan." And be nice about it. All right. Anybody else some comments on that, or some maybe stories that you want to tell yourself from your own experience?
Terry, one critical piece to
Some louder.
the one critical piece about getting older is at what stage do you help your parents get to the estate planning stage? Because everybody's in good health, you're in your 70s, all of a sudden you have to lose your assets to go into the nursing home. You know, how do you gently do that? How do you tell them, hey, we've got to get you a power of attorney on your accounts? They don't want that taken away from them. They don't want their house gone, but there's ways to get around that easily and that tactfully.
That is a really difficult thing, and a lot of times, it seems like men, maybe women are just as bad at this, is they're very private about their finances. They do not want the children snooping around in their finances. Anybody have any suggestions on that? Linda's talking about when a lot of times maybe it's an older generation that you just didn't talk about that, and even though times have changed now, they interpret the bringing up of that subject as that they've got one foot in the grave, and they kind of resent it. They don't want to talk about it. Sometimes even you get a stubbornness, even when somebody is on their deathbed and they know it, they do not want to talk about where to from here. So comments or questions? Charlene?
Well, we all got one foot in the grave, one time or another, and that's the reality of it. Now, I have a wonderful son-in-law who is a financial planner, and he volunteered to sit down with me and talk to me about options, and that's
Very
very
helpful.
helpful. Very
Yeah.
helpful.
So choose whoever your kids marry very carefully. I mean, I remember when Jeannie's mom and dad passed, and when my mom and dad passed, I didn't volunteer to be executor or anything like that, but it's really helpful to have somebody that has a little bit of acumen or expertise on how to handle some things like that. And I remember, I'm not giving myself a big head, but I remember Jeannie And her brother's talking about, boy, if we wouldn't have had Terry here to help us
Very true.
through this, we would have been in a real mess, you know, because there's so many things that you have to talk about. And if you've never been down that road in shepherding someone through the valley of the shadow of death, it's a learning experience. So anybody have any comments on that? I guess the best thing, with an answer to that would be ask around. Ask around how you do that.
Well, I took it 20, my neighbor took care of her for 22 years, and she was very private with everything. And I finally got into her finances. I had to pay her bills. She just wanted a check. She was getting dementia. She still wanted to be able to have some control over things, you know. And the best thing was, while she was alert enough to do all these things, let's go to an attorney, explain all your options to you, you know, and then that helped.
Yeah.
Get somebody else involved.
It's hard, even when one of my best older friends was Jack Simpson. And I know he had a stubborn streak like a lot of his generation did, but I've told you this many, many times. When Janet passed away, he was lost. Because Janet was Proverbs 31 through and through. Her domain was the home, and that stretched to taking care of the bills and doing the laundry and putting the food on the table, right on schedule. And so I tried, in fact, when Janet was still living and she started to go down, I talked to her about some bills, you know, how to get them set up on them. And she was very receptive to that, but Jack was not. And Jack is old school. He will take his paycheck and go to the bank and deposit it in person. There's not going to be any automatic draft, you know, no direct deposit. And there's no automatic debits. You know, nowadays, in which you didn't know it, you can set up all your bills to where they're just electronically debited. And it's really, really safe. There's nothing, I mean, if you were worried about it when it first was introduced, I could understand that, but it's really time-tested now. But Jack was every time he'd get a bill, he would go to the electric company to pay. He would drive to the electric company to go into the desk to pay the bill. The water company the same way. But as he got older, the bills just stacked up on the table. And then he would get late notices. And he would have to go in and argue with them, but you're 3 months late. You're not just a month late. You're, you know. But it was just you could not change him right, you know, to the very end. And then I tried to talk to Lee about his son and Lee was on the block. In fact, Lee is probably worse than Jack was. Don.
I think one thing I know I've done is underestimate the elderly.
You underestimate them?
Yes.
As far as what they can do, or
You think they can't do it, and my dad told me once, he said, "What do you think I am, an invalid or something?"
yeah, that's a good comment.
My mom was like that.
Yeah, that's
Now that I'm in my dotage.
yeah. Those are two good comments from both of y'all. So that should be on Bernstein's list as well. That one would be on there as, what do you think I am, an invalid? You know. So yeah, and that gets to an area of dignity, doesn't it? Where we don't want to communicate to them, where you're just biding your time. Why don't you hurry up and die and just step aside? They still have contributions to make. And sometimes, I was surfing through a TV show last night. There was this Alaska, living in Alaska, and there was some old man sitting there helping them to revive an old, did you see it, Keith? An old tractor or an old, it was what do you get when your lights go out? Generator. It was an old generator up there in Alaska, big old honking thing, but the guy really needed it for the severe winters. And this old timer, he's a marvel when it comes to machines.
He was
They thought
94 years old.
Oh, you know what I'm talking about?
I
Yeah.
saw
So sometimes people, I mean, right to their graves, they can just really be making great contributions. Somebody over here, Keith.
It's a good thing I had my sister a few years ago when mother was starting. She wasn't losing it, but she just couldn't do anything. So we talked to her a little bit, and we started arguing, and I told her, I said, well, we gotta take care of your money. And she hit me over the head with a shoe. And Mary jumped in and said, Mother, we gotta do this and that, and she calmed everything down.
So when Mary said it, it was okay.
Yeah.
But when Keith said it,
That was wrong.
yeah. Chris?
You know, I deal with a lot of older and, you know, I have a little bit of a different relationship because it's not personal,
Yeah.
you know, I guess. But, you know, one thing I talk to people about a lot is final expense insurance, which just the name of it, you know, is a little bit of a downer, you know. But nobody ever, I've never had anybody get upset about it or be unwilling to talk about it. It's a reality that, you know, people know it's coming, and for the most part, people are very receptive to the idea of not wanting to burden their kids with, you know, paying for a funeral or whatever.
Yeah, good comment there. Let's use that now to segue to the very bottom here of our notes, and let's read this again. We've touched on this in times past, but let's be a little bit sympathetic and empathetic here. What are some of the more prevalent diseases, not diseases, but things that make older people uncomfortable or whatever? And I've listed some of these, and there's so many of them. Loneliness, illness, insecurity, anxiety, fear, guilt, self-pity. Don's comment made me think of this, feelings of uselessness, and then Chris's comment, worried about being a burden. That's one thing that motivates a lot of people to do pre-planning with even with their undertaker or funeral home or whatever. We all know that, one of the 10 Commandments. I like this one, Leviticus 19:32. You shall rise up before the gray head and honor the aged. And then Proverbs 23:22. Listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she is old. And Jesus, in recollecting the commandment about honoring mother and father, he went on to say, he who speaks evil of his mother and father, let him be put to death. Actually, that's a reference from the Old Testament too. But Jesus ties those two verses together. And then 1 Timothy 5, verse 4 and verse 8, Paul says, if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to practice piety in regard to their own family and to make some return to their parents. And then he adds, if anyone doesn't provide for his own family, his own widowed mother or whatever, he has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel or an unbeliever. So a lot of scriptures speak of this very thing. And one last note here before Keith throws out the book. Someone has said this is the test of a nation, the greatness of a nation especially, or a culture. How do we treat our older folks? And some countries are way ahead of us on this. They do a much better job. Sometimes, to be frank about it, we have become almost shameful as a nation, as a culture. Phyllis, last word.
I always taught my kids to respect the grandparents because I respect them. And I think kids need to learn respect their own parents. You have to respect them regardless of what they've done because they're your parents.
Yeah. Good comment. comment, and again, that leads me to something I saw not long ago, and I think, I'm not sure if it was Haley or Charlie, but when they're little ones, sometimes little ones, I might walk by and I say, hey Luke, how you doing? And he's just playing with his dinosaur, or this morning his monster church bus, or whatever. And who am I? I'm not about to interrupt his interest. Now, I can be upset like Luke stubbed me. That would be ridiculous. But what is important, and along the lines of what Phyllis is saying there, I have heard Haley step in and say, Luke, Mr. Terry is talking to you. You look at him and you say something to him. You talk to him. Or the same thing with Ken. You know, you just don't ignore old people. Okay, I understand if they don't rise up when the gray head walks in. But when he talks to them, the parents are trying to get them to say, you show respect, and one way you do that is you make eye contact, and when they ask you a question, you answer respectfully. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you so much. And give me suggestions. We've got about 4 weeks left.